Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and this is the Headphone 2, the second generation air motion transformer or ribbon driver headphone from Heinz Electrodynamic Designs. This was sent to me directly from the company head in Germany. They have asked nothing in return other than a fair and honest evaluation of this product. As far as I know, this is a loan. It will either be going back to head or will be going on to the next reviewer. That hasn't been decided yet. And that's going to be sad because I ended up really liking this headphone, and I would not mind hanging on to it for a while as a reference piece. I'm pretty jazzed about it, and I'm pretty excited to tell you why I like it so much. So please stick around after Shameless self-promotion to find out why I say such things.
Hello. I'm one of the reasons that Wave Theory can't spend all of his money on audio gear. He wants you to know that your support is vital for keeping the channel running. So if you enjoy Wave Theory's bussin' review riz and no-cap review style and want to encourage him to stay in the basement so I don't have to listen to his dad jokes as much, like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also send him a donation on PayPal or sign up for the Patreon. Links are in the description. Now on to the review.
I may have failed to mention the price there in my little intro. This goes for $2,000 US, and that puts it in an interesting place in the market because that's the same price as one of my current reference headphones and one that I really like, and that is the HiFiMan HE1000se. And then also the double-sided Modhouse Tungsten is in there right about $2,000 US too. And I recently did a re-review of that one where with some slight modification from Ryan at Modhouse, I thought that that one really directly competed with the HE1000se as another potential reference at $2,000 US. This one, the short take on it is that it gets right in there in the thick of it with the HE1000se and the double-sided Modhouse Tungsten. It is another fantastic $2,000 US headphone that really helps with those other two, the HE1000se and the Modhouse Tungsten. Really warps the price to performance curve in the market right now and has been leading me to think pretty long and deeply about maybe $2,000 US is kind of the high-end hi-fi headphone sweet spot right now. I may have to do a full video on that coming up soon. But just to kind of give you a takeaway there on this, yes, this is an excellent performing headphone, and it gets right in there with the best the market has to offer at $2,000 US. I should also mention that I had the privilege of reviewing version 1 of the headphone back, I think, close to 3 years ago now. For context, I filmed this in late May of 2024, and I believe it was in the summer of 2021 when I was able to review Headphone V1. And that was a written review that I posted on HEDDphone, and I will put a link in the description down below where you can go back and read that. And my memory of the V1, and also helps to refresh the memory by going back and looking at my review, is that there were some excellent aspects to its sound. It was very good at resolution and detail retrieval. It was very good at staging and the spatial aspects of sound, like imaging, separation, layering, and that sort of thing. And it was very good at timbre. It had a very natural and realistic tone and timbre to it. The issues that I had with V1 is that it was horrendously uncomfortable for me, and physically. It was just too heavy, and the fit was all weird and all of that. And then sonically, it did not have much in the way of dynamic impact. There was just no physicality to the sound to an unrealistic degree. It just sounded a little bit over-muted in terms of the dynamics and so forth. And so I was very curious to hear this one and to see if they addressed those issues. So that's other things that we are going to be looking at in the course of this review. All right, so let's get on with it then, right? And let's break it down in there. So again, $2,000 US. The rated impedance on this thing is 41 ohms with an 89 decibel per milliwatt sensitivity. Now, that makes it kind of middling in terms of how easy it is or difficult it is to drive. HEDD recommends a minimum of 200 milliwatts of amp power for this thing, but they do recommend 1,000 milliwatts or 1 watt or higher in power. And I think that is mostly accurate based on my experience with this. It's not inordinately difficult to drive, but nor is it super easy to drive. It's just kind of in the middle of the road. Like it's not going to challenge an amplifier like a Susvara or an HE6 series headphone is going to do, or like what the Tungsten is going to do from Modhouse, but nor is it going to be pushed by just about everything like, you know, an Odyssey LCD-X or even the HiFiMan HE1000se and all of that. Again, it's kind of in the middle there. All right. What I'm going to do next here is switch up the video feed here. We're going to do an overhead view to give you a close-up of the build. I'm going to show you the packaging and the accessories on this one because they are kind of interesting. And then we'll come back on the other side of all of that and I will list out test gear, and then we'll get into the sound and then briefly touch on the comparisons with those other $2,000 models that I mentioned. All right, let's get to it. All right, quasi-overhead view to talk about the build and all of that, because it is a really well-built headphone and there are a couple of design features in it that I want to show you on an up-close view. But this is the back of the ear cups with the AMT drivers, sort of occasionally visible as a flash of yellow inside. I will show them to you on the reverse here in just a moment. One thing to pay of notice here, and you can kind of see it here in my camera view, is that the matte black finish here does show dirt and grime and that sort of thing relatively easy. So for the neat freaks out there, keeping this clean can be a little bit of a challenge. But otherwise, we have a perforated metal grill on the back here that is ridged, like there are bumps in it along there. Okay, and now we will look at the other side of the cups here. The ear opening, I don't think my fingers are as thick as Zeos's fingers, but like, you know, did you see how many knuckles fit in there? 3 of my knuckles fit in there. These are not particularly large ear openings, so even though it is technically an around-the-ear headphone, I think some people with not even, I mean, just slightly above average size ears, you're going to feel some contact, okay, with the pad here on your ear, here and there. Okay, so people with really large ears, that could be an issue. Just something to keep in mind. But the pads are nice and soft. They are easy to remove, and you get an extra set in the box. When I first unboxed this thing, I was like, oh, hey, 2 different kinds of pads. And no, they're not actually different. You just get an extra set, which is a nice touch, I think, on there. All right. They have changed to dual 3.5 millimeter cable entry in here. I believe the version 1 of Headphone used mini XLR. They are now 3.5 millimeter connectors with a forward angle. And you can see there's plenty of room in there to accommodate most aftermarket connectors. You get a really thick barrel here with no extension on it. You might hit the bottom of the cup here, but I think most aftermarket cables are going to work pretty well. All right. The pads are really easy to remove because they are just simply held on by magnets. And it's a strong magnet, okay? So they're easy to remove, but it does take a little bit of force. Anyway, here's the inside, and you can see the yellow folds of the AMT driver in there. Okay, and I don't know how visible it is here, but like the folds are a variable size, and that's one of the, my understanding is anyway, that's one of the changes they made from V1 to V2, is that the V2 does not have uniform fold size on all of the folds of the AMT driver there, and that helps them get better control over frequency response and so forth. So that's interesting. But anyway, the pads are held on magnetically. They have this little bit of cloth there in between, so it's fairly straightforward to take the pads on and off if you need to. Though you can see to get them back on, you do kind of have to push them into place a little bit, make sure they're seated on their right, because you do get a little bit of a gap, okay, in there. You just kind of push it down and it eventually settles into place there. Okay. One of the main reasons I wanted to do this view, though, is this headband system. Oops, sorry for bumping the camera there. Okay. V1 of the headphone was notoriously uncomfortable, right? And so they have redesigned the headband here, and they did something pretty cool, I think. It is a suspension strap system where you get this nice padded cushion here that goes on the head with this nice groove in the middle so you don't get a hot spot right on the top of your head. But they have kind of woven this strap through here, okay, in interesting ways that gives you a couple of degrees of adjustment, if you will. So we see this like kind of, I don't know, almost belt loop style, not belt loop, but like, you know how you have different holes to adjust your belt size, kind of like that thing going on here, okay, on either side, okay, of this. And this does a couple of things. If you loosen that, you see that there's another strap in there too, right? Another one right underneath it. And so what happens is that this top one gives you some freedom of motion up here on where this pad right here up top sits. And then this bottom one right here controls like how much motion you have this way, if you will, on there. So this adjustment, get it back to where I was set, okay? This adjustment allows you to do a couple of things. One, you can vary the height with which this sits on the head by giving this more or less space to move up and down. Okay, so if you like it to sit up, or for the pads to sit lower on your head, all these and so forth, so it kind of fits loose, you can move this up higher. If you like the pads to sit a little bit higher on your head, like which I tend to like, I like them to sit a little bit higher on the side of my face, sides of my head. Okay, then you can adjust this down a little bit. But particularly playing with this part right in here, because I showed you could make that adjustment, is you can adjust the clamp force. Okay, you can really tighten this down so that it doesn't pull very far and gives you a really tight clamp, or you can loosen that up so you get quite a bit of play and get a very loose clamp. I have landed roughly in the middle. So this headband system here is, I think, really smart. It gives you a lot of adjustability and customization to fit your head shape. Okay, and really it solves a lot of the comfort issues that at least I had with the V1. The V1 was really uncomfortable for me when I reviewed it, and it just was not comfortable to have on my head for very long periods of time. This one, even though it is about 550 grams, right in that range, I think I'm going from memory there, over 500 grams anyway. So even though it's kind of a bulky looking and still a bit heavy of a headphone, this headband system does a really good job of distributing the weight of the headphone around the head and avoiding head spots and all of that. And then again, you can kind of customize the amount of clamp force that goes on here, and it really is comfortable to wear for extended periods of time. I did not have any comfort issues with this headphone, so that is a big improvement over V1, so well done to HEDD on that one. And so really that's the basics of the build and so forth, and just wanted to show that to you. So let's go back and move on to other parts of the video. I don't always show packaging, but I thought I would do it this time just because there's a couple of interesting aspects to it. One, the box is really quite large. It is much, much larger than the headphone. All right, so let's look at what's going on inside of it to figure out why that might be the case. This cardboard slip sleeve is just that. It is a slip sleeve, comes right off. And then you get this box in here that, is it a box or is it a filing cabinet? Just, it's like we get little drawers, if you will, that in theory pull out like so. Oh, and then you see they can trade position like that. So you pull this thing out and then it pops open like this. And yeah, okay, here's the accessories, or at least some of them. The extra set of ear pads is in there. I have one of the stock cables out, but I can show you what the stock cable looks like based on the fact that we have other options here. So we've got 4.4 millimeter here. We've got balanced XLR. We have 1/4 inch. That was the one over on my desk there, but let me just pull one of these out a little bit more so that you can see. Okay, that's clearly an adapter right there to 3.5 millimeter. Is this one all? Yep, okay. XLR to 4.4 millimeters. So the cable itself is actually 4.4 millimeter terminated here, and it's kind of Velcroed in. All right, now we got it. I used the 1/4 inch version of this for a little bit. It is a little bit on the thin side. Okay, like there's not a ton of material into it. Like it's not terrible. It's just not great. It's a little bit on the springy side. Okay, I think a lot of people are going to end up buying aftermarket cables for this anyway, and you can because, you know, it's got the 3.5 millimeter connection on it. So anyway, that's part of the packaging there, and then where the headphone itself actually sits in here. Again, you pull that out and then, come on. Okay, this one actually lifts up like that. Okay, and then inside we have a carrying case. Okay, some lit in there too. Okay, that sort of thing. Little compartment here to put cabling if you need it. Okay, and so forth. So there are the accessories. This is still a rather large-ish carrying case, honestly. But this whole system here with the way the boxes, you know, fit in here and then they go in here. Right, I just found that interesting and worth sharing. Like it ends up looking more like a filing cabinet. Okay, on with other stuff. Turning our attention towards sound, let's talk about the test gear that I used to listen to this headphone here. Sources would have been using Roon again with local lossless or high-res FLAC files, or streaming high-res or high-res lossless FLAC files via Qobuz all through Roon. Roon endpoints included my Cord 2 Go streamer and Sonor Ultra Rendu streamers. And then downstream from those DACs would have included the Cord Hugo 2, which I also used directly as an amp to drive this at some point. And then my Berkeley Alpha Series 2 DAC, the Allo Revolution DAC, and I should also mention I used the matching Allo USB bridge in there as a Roon endpoint connected to the Revolution DAC. And then also I used the Black Ice Audio Aries, which I am nearing the completion and being able to film a review of that. That's coming up very soon as well. Then other amps that I used include the Hi-Fi-Man Golden Wave Prelude headphone amplifier, the Lake People G111 Mark II, and then also the LTA Velo, which is their brand new sort of entry-level microzodal headphone amp and preamp. That is in for a review, and I used that to drive this as well. And of course, the Aries, there is an all-in-one DAC and amp, so I used the amplifier in that to test this in there too. All right. What did all of that reveal to me about the sound? Again, the sound on this is excellent. And the areas where headphone version 1 was weak are no longer weaknesses in here. I've already mentioned the big improvement in comfort due to the new headband system and all of that from V1 to V2. So that, they passed that test with relative ease. The dynamics issue, the impact, the slam, you know, that sort of thing on this headphone. It's not a head slammer. It's not going to be a Focal or a Fostex that just comes in and, you know, assaults your eardrums with a lot of physicality, but it's not poor either. I would say it just gets into at least the level of average and middle of the pack in terms of just the world of headphones, in terms of the dynamic impact in the slam and all of that. So not necessarily a strength, but now to the level where it's not fair to call it a weakness either. And I think for what they are going for and what they want to do, that is a good place to be. So in terms of those things, of improving over V1 significantly, thumbs up on that. Okay, now let's get into it here. HEDD says on their website, and as I talked to their representative who was emailing me and all of that, he made it clear that they really envision this as a pro audio product to help audio engineers with mixing and mastering and that sort of thing. And in fact, I was told in an email, up front that like because of that, I might find the bass to be a little bit lean on this, and to just EQ up the bass a little bit if I found that to be true. And I'm going to say for the most part, not really, okay? There might be just a little bit of roll off in the true deep sub bass, so the bass extension is not world beating, but again, it is also not poor. The overall frequency response on this one is rather neutral. There is just a little bit of mid-range emphasis, I would say, but it's more of a mid-range shelf to me. It does not sound peaky through the mids. It sounds pretty well tonally balanced. And then the treble is nice and crisp and clean and extended, but it also just very rarely ever gets harsh. It's nice and smooth in there. So is it W-shaped? Is it V-shaped? Is it warm? Is it bright? Those kind of terms that we use to describe the perceived frequency response of these things. Like on the whole, I'm having trouble putting my finger on any particular word there other than just generally neutral. There's pretty good balance between the bass, mid, and treble presence. The tonality, the tonal balance through the frequency range is also quite strong. There's pretty realistic and natural, at least to my ears, realistic and natural sounding balance between fundamental frequencies and their harmonics and that sort of thing. The timing aspects of the attack and decay is also strong and realistic and natural, and that put those together, that excellent tonality, that the good strong timing on the attacks and the decays, and then also the fact that the dynamics and the impact and all that are now up there to the point where it's not a weakness on this thing, on this headphone as it was on V1. Then the timbre comes across really well, and particularly through the mid-range. I thought the mid-timbre on this unit is just very natural, very organic, very realistic. So I enjoyed most vocals, stringed instruments, even brass instruments and all of that are usually not too harsh or forward or anything like that. And that says a lot coming from me because I am a listener, and if you've watched my channel, you are familiar with this, that I have a lot of problems with shoutiness and honkiness in headphones, and this had very little of that. Even if mid-range gets very, very busy in the music and all of that, it kept its cool and presented all of that really well. Okay. Detail retrieval and resolution, also excellent. The fine details in the music are all there. The zizziness of bows being dragged across strings. If there are ghost notes on drum hits, those come out really well. Room reverbs are resolved beautifully and naturally, and so forth. I just didn't notice that there was any significant piece of information usually missing from the music in here. Is it going to be as resolving as something like a Susvara or a Utopia? No. But again, it is right there on the level of like an HE1000se or the double-sided Modhouse Tungsten, which to me are kind of the standard bearers when it comes to resolution and detail retrieval at the $2,000 price point, and this is right there with them on that aspect. The spatial presentation here. The soundstage is not particularly big and it's not particularly small, right? It's neither grandiose and epic, nor is it intimate or, even claustrophobic. It is in the middle of those things. For the most part, it just kind of is what it needs to be. It's not quite big enough to pull off a truly epic scale and sound like the big egg-shaped Hi-Fi-Mans are. So if you are into big epic scale kind of music like 1812 Overture, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, things of that nature, or even Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, right? Just big, grandiose kind of stuff. You might find the soundstage on this to be just a little bit underwhelming in that particular aspect, but for most material, I think for most listeners, it's going to be just fine. Now, within the soundstage, the imaging and the separation are quite strong. The depth and layering is also pretty good. So the three-dimensionality of the spatial presentation is Again, one of the best you're going to find around 2,000 US dollars, right there with the HE1000se, maybe just behind that one, just a skosh, but also right there with the Mod House Tungsten, you know, that sort, and you know, right in there, pretty strong in that aspect. Now, the way that the spatial presentation is presented is a little bit different than some, and this is neither good nor bad. It just is me telling you what my listening experience is here, so you can make a decision as to whether or not this will interest you. Is you're kind of in the performance more than it is being presented to you. If you've watched my channel before and watched my reviews, like I mentioned how like HEDD and Focal headphones kind of do like this bubble around the head kind of spatial presentation, where if you're at a symphony, right, an HEDD or a Focal is gonna like put you on the maestro's stand and the music's just kind of gonna be all around you. Okay, as a result. Something like the Hi-Fi Man, the big egg-shaped Hi-Fi Mans, or the Sennheiser HD800 series, or something like that, are more speaker-like. They more like put you back in the audience, okay, on the, in that symphony hall where the music is being presented to you. There are still some wraparound effects with like reverbs and all of that filling out behind you if you want on those headphones, but the music itself is mostly all out in front. The headphone here is not really either of those all the way. It's got elements of both that. You're kind of close to the music and in it in terms of its staging, but it's not quite like being on the maestro's stand in the way that HEDDs and Focals are. It has some elements of presenting the music to you, but it's not quite back into the listening area, into the audience seating area of the performance hall like a Hi-Fi Man or the Sennheiser HD800 series is going to do. It is in the middle, maybe on just the edge of the stage, so to speak. Okay, so it is like the distance from head to where it sounds like the first row of music and instruments is a little bit closer than some headphones, but it's also not fully immersing you into the performance like some others do. So it's just kind of in the middle there. Best job I think I can do of explaining that. I hope that is helpful to you as the audience. Again, I didn't find that to be either good nor bad. It just was, and it's just a little bit different kind of presentation, and I'm just trying to help you understand what listening to this headphone is like. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the dynamics and the impact here and all of that, because there's a decent amount of sub-bass rumble once you're above the roll-off. And again, the roll-off is really, really deep. We're talking, you know, like 40, 50 hertz you got to get below before the bass information really starts to disappear. That's getting really far down there. But above that, there's pretty good bass presence and a reasonable amount of impact. Like kick drums have a healthy thump to them. Okay, but not like an over-the-top assault. And again, it's not going to be like a Fostex or a Focal or an Abyss or an HEDD in terms of how much it hits there, but it's also not going to be poor either. It's definitely a big improvement over the V1 of the headphone. Now, where the dynamics really wake up on this is through the mids. Snare drums sound incredibly snappy on this thing. Like there's just this really quick thwack kind of sound going on with the snare drum hits and all of that. And that's a part of the dynamics and the presentation that stood out to me on this one as just being like is really amazing and impressive. Like I really enjoyed the sound of just listening to drummers drum on this headphone, because just the combination of the timbre and the speed and the dynamics and all of that in there through the mid-range and with drums was just a lot of fun. Okay, really enjoyed it. Really realistic and natural sounding in there. And the improvement in dynamics, I think, over the V1 is really what brings that to the fore. If you like just a little bit more sub-bass presence, it does take to equalization EQ pretty well. The Black Ice Aries DAC amp has a sub-bass switch or knob on it, where it's basically just a bass EQ, right? A really deep bass EQ, and you can turn that up here. And this could handle level 3 or 4 out of, is it 6 or 8? Can't really tell from here. There's like 6 or 8 levels of sub-bass increase on the Aries bass knob there. And this can get up to 3 or 4 before it starts to show any kind of breakup or distortion in the bass. But by the time you're getting up there, you're turning this into a, like, you know, kind of a subwoofer on the head kind of amount of rumble. Just, you know, a fun but over the top amount of bass, even for someone like me who enjoys a little bit thicker, heavier bass at times. Okay, so it does handle the bass well if you want to EQ up the bass. Also, like the treble EQs well too, if you want to make it a little bit brighter. Let me flesh this out a little bit more here. The treble is very tonal, is well tonally balanced as well. It's very smooth. Rarely did I notice harshness, sibilance, sharpness, that sort of thing too. In fact, I think for some, it might be just a little bit too laid back and not quite extended or airy enough in the treble. That didn't bother me, but I could see some liking a little bit more. But it does take to EQ well again. Again, using the Aries, it's got some high frequency tone controls on it too. Boosting that up, and then yes, the crispness of and the airiness can come back in and all of that. And that also opens up the sound of the headphone here too, because one, call it a complaint if you will, it's really not that big of a deal to me, but it might be to some, is that when you put it on and you wear it, it is open back, but it doesn't sound very open, and it doesn't necessarily feel very open. And some of that is like just, you know, some of the airiness of the treble and all of that isn't quite there. But if you miss that, you can EQ it in without a whole lot of difficulty. So now let me come back and talk about the sound of this thing, reference caliber sound, okay, at $2,000 US. I think it has the resolution and the spatial accuracy and the detail retrieval and all of that to be an effective pro audio tool for mixing and mastering. So I think to HEDD's goal of producing that kind of product, they've done it, it's good there. But it also is a very like non-fatiguing and enjoyable listen, and the physical comfort is such, and it's customizable to the point where I think for most people it's going to be a comfortable and non-fatiguing and engaging listen for home use as well. All right, and if there's not enough bass for you, it does take to EQ pretty well. If there's not enough treble for you, it takes to EQ pretty well if you want it. I generally didn't need those things, but they were fun to play around with in the hardware domain for me. I am not a software EQer. All right. Now, as far as comparisons go, I've already mentioned the most natural comparisons, and those would be the double-sided Modhouse Tungsten and the HiFiMan HE1000se, both right about $2,000 US, both open back planar magnetic headphones and all of that. Now, comparing the three of these is going to take some time. And honestly, I am thinking that that is best served in its own video. Okay, and so I think I'm going to make that video, because not only has the market really changed here, because it used to be that this one, the HE1000se, was like the only game in town, in my opinion, at $2,000 US. It just completely warped the market. HiFiMan flexed on the market when they marked this one down from $3,500 to $2,000 USD. Just the price to performance ratio there at $2,000 was insanely good. Then Modhouse came along and released the Tungsten series, and the double-sided version, for me, with a spacer in there to break the seal, and then using the hybrid pads, gets right on the overall technical level of the HE1000se and becomes a viable alternative. And then this one, the Headphone V2, comes along, and it gets right in the thick of it with these two as well, creating a very compelling package that is a true competitor to these. So the market has kind of undergone what could be described as a tectonic shift here, because where there was just one that was really warping the market in its favor there is now three. Okay? And so I think I'm going to leave a more detailed comparison of these three to another video, which I hope to turn around here in the very near future, because I need to be giving the Tungsten back and probably this one. Although, please, HEDD, let me keep this one for a while. Just a while, okay? And so forth. So I think I will do that. And otherwise just say that, like, I mean, hopefully the comparison, obviously, they all three sound different, Okay, they're all a little bit different, but they all are basically roughly equal to each other in terms of their technical prowess. And it's a great time to be in the market at that price because you have options now, right? And so I'll talk more about that coming up. But Headphone V2, a home run of a headphone. I really like it. Very few drawbacks to it. The drawbacks that do exist are, fairly easy to fix with just a little bit of EQ that doesn't take that long or isn't that hard to figure out. And that's if you need it. You may not, okay? The power issue, not really a big issue. You're not going to push it with DAPs. Like I should have mentioned, like my Hugo 2, when I drove it directly off of that, it did fine. But I had to push its little volume knob almost all the way up into the white zone, which is the highest zone. So it pushed it fine. It was plenty loud, clean, and detailed, and good sounding, and all of that. But I could tell that it was pushing that Hugo 2 to its limit. But all of the desktop amps, even the more everyman priced signal chain of the Allo Revolution DAC and the Lake People G111 Mark II amplifier, this sounded good on. Yes, it sounded better yet on the Aries, and then the Velo, using the Hugo 2 as a DAC to that one, and then like the Berkeley plus the Prelude in there. Sounded better on all of those, but like not a huge amount of power. I did not find it to be like super signal chain picky or anything like that either. So, there's a lot going for this and not a lot against it. Complaints out there that you might need to be aware of that could be issues for you. Again, it is not particularly airy and extended in the treble, fixable. Not particularly extended and rumbly in the deep bass, but fixable with some EQ there. For an open back headphone, it doesn't sound very open, so some people might be thrown by that. And again, it is heavy, though I do think they did a good job with the weight distribution, and I didn't have any comfort issues. All right, so before I start repeating myself over and over and over again, we'll wrap this up again. Headphone 2, excellent, easy to recommend. Stay tuned for a near future video where I compare it to these two here in a more in-depth way. So please remember to like, comment, subscribe, check out my PayPal, my Patreon, do those things you generally do to support YouTube channels. Thanks for watching my review of the Headphone version 2, and as always, enjoy the music.